A mere 48 hours after the wedding, my son-in-law arrived at my home, a notary in tow. "We've just sold this house," he announced. "You're being moved to a senior living community." His self-satisfied smirk was a clear sign he expected a swift and easy victory over an old woman, but I looked him squarely in the eye and calmly replied, "That's wonderful. Let's make a quick stop at the police station on our way. They're quite fascinated by the file I sent over about you." Those words shattered his composure. "Marcus, Amelia, and I need our own space to truly begin our life as a family," he had said. Marcus leaned forward in his chair, the dim restaurant lighting glinting off his wine glass. "Your house would be an ideal start for a young couple like us." The statement struck me with the force of a physical blow. I carefully placed my fork on the table, the sweet taste of wedding cake in my mouth suddenly turning acrid and bitter. Just 2 days. We had been celebrating their union only 2 days ago, and now he was making this demand. "Marcus, that is my home," I said. My voice was steady, but my hands gripped the edge of the table. "I designed it myself over 20 years ago." Amelia shifted uncomfortably in her seat between us, the candlelight catching the new ring on her finger. The intimate booth at the Hawthorne Grill suddenly felt constricting, as if the walls were closing in. At the surrounding tables, other patrons laughed and conversed, completely unaware of the bombshell that had just detonated in our small corner of the world. "But you're just one person rattling around in such a big house?" Marcus's smile never faltered. "It's simply not practical. And at your age, wouldn't you be more comfortable in a place that's easier to manage?" At my age, I was 68, hardly ancient, but the way Marcus said it made me feel as though I was already on my last legs. The stem of my wine glass felt fragile in my grip. "We would take such wonderful care of it," he pressed on, reaching to place his hand over Amelia's. "Just imagine it. Your future grandchildren playing in those very rooms." Amelia's gaze flickered between us. "Mom, Marcus, please, let's not argue. This is supposed to be a happy time." Happy? I had just written a check for $15,000 to cover their wedding reception. The floral centerpieces from the ceremony, now sitting on our table, were beginning to wilt, their petals browning at the edges. "Marcus," I said, sitting up straighter. "At my age, I am perfectly capable of making my own decisions about my own property. You two are welcome to stay for a few days while you look for a place of your own." His confident demeanor wavered for a split second. A cold, calculating look flashed in his eyes before the charming facade slipped back into place. "Of course, Evelyn. I completely understand." But his tone had an edge to it now. "It's just, with the cost of rentals these days, and on Amelia's teaching salary, we'll figure it out, honey." Amelia squeezed his hand, but I could hear the undertone of worry in her voice. Money had always been a source of stress for her. Marcus's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly. "I was just hoping we could approach this as a family. After all, what is the point of you holding on to such a valuable asset when it could be benefiting all of us?" A valuable asset? Not my home. Not the place where my husband Richard had carried me over the threshold. The place where Amelia took her first steps. Where Richard spent his final days. An asset. The soft jazz playing in the background now seemed to be mocking me. Couples at other tables whispered to each other, sharing private moments. While my family was being fractured in real time, a waiter moved silently past, refilling our water glasses with a practiced, unobtrusive grace. "The answer is no." Each word came out with more force than the last. "Find your own home." Marcus leaned back, his smile growing brittle. "Well, we can certainly revisit this when emotions are not running quite so high." Emotions? As if my desire to keep the home I built was an irrational outburst. Amelia's face began to crumple. "Maybe we should just go home," she suggested. Home. She meant my house, where they had been staying since their honeymoon. Where Marcus had already started making inquiries about the furnace, the property taxes, the neighborhood's market trends. I pushed my chair back from the table, my napkin sliding unheeded to the floor. The other diners became a blur in my peripheral vision as a rush of blood pounded in my ears. "Evelyn, wait!" Amelia started to rise, but I was already on my feet, pulling my wallet from my purse. Two $20 bills slapped onto the table with more force than was necessary. "Take care of the bill," I managed to say. "I need some fresh air." Marcus's voice trailed after me as I turned and walked away. "We'll discuss this later, Evelyn, after you've had a chance to think things through rationally." The warmth of the restaurant pressed against my back as I headed for the exit, every step taking me further from my daughter's pleading eyes and my son-in-law's predatory smile. The hostess offered a polite nod, oblivious to the fact that the ground had just crumbled beneath my feet. Outside, the cool March air was a welcome shock against my face. I fumbled for my car keys, my hands shaking from more than just the cold. The drive home was a silent, tense affair, Amelia's worried glances in the rearview mirror feeling like a weight on my conscience. By the time I turned into my own driveway, my scarf felt like it was strangling me. Inside, I loosened the silk knot and poured myself 3 fingers of brandy. The familiar shadows of my study offered a small comfort. The leather chair, worn perfectly to the shape of my body. The bookshelves, holding 4 decades of collected knowledge. The photos of Richard, smiling at me from the corner of my desk. I sank into the chair with a heavy sigh. Outside, the streetlights cast geometric shadows across my lawn. My lawn. My house. The sheer audacity of his demand still left me breathless. $15,000. I had written that check without a moment's hesitation, my heart swelling as Amelia described her dream wedding. The Hawthorne Grill's reception hall, the string quartet, the extravagant floral arrangements that cost more than a small car, all of it. Just so my only daughter could have her perfect day. And now her new husband wanted the house too. I picked up my phone, scrolling through the wedding photos from 2 days prior. Marcus cutting the cake, his hand placed over Amelia's on the knife. Marcus dancing with my daughter, spinning her around until she was dizzy with laughter. Marcus shaking my hand, calling me Mom for the first time. Had he been plotting this all along? The brandy burned as it went down, but not as fiercely as the memory of Marcus's smile when I had refused him a smile that suggested he had anticipated my resistance. As if this was all just a move in a much larger, more sinister game. My fingers found the desk drawer and pulled out the leather-bound journal where I kept my important notes. Richard had given it to me on the day I retired from my engineering firm. "For all those brilliant ideas still rattling around in your head," he'd said. "March 2025, I wrote, my handwriting steady despite the turmoil inside me. Marcus Thorne demanded ownership of the house during a celebratory dinner, cited practical reasons, and repeatedly mentioned my age. Amelia seemed distressed but deferred to her husband. The pen felt heavy in my hand. What kind of person does that? Just 2 days after a wedding I had paid for. He wants my home. He wasn't asking to purchase it, not suggesting we sell it and divide the proceeds. He wanted me to simply hand it over, as if I were some senile old woman ready to be put out to pasture. I set the pen down and walked over to the window. The street was quiet and peaceful. Porch lights cast a warm glow, and the flicker of televisions could be seen behind drawn curtains. Normal families, living their normal lives, not contending with sons-in-law who discussed valuable assets over what was left of a wedding cake. Back at my desk, I opened my laptop. Bank statements, property records, insurance policies, a lifetime of careful planning represented by numbers on a screen. The house was valued at over $500,000 in the current market. My pension and savings were enough to last another 20, maybe 30 years if I continued to be prudent. Marcus knew all of this, somehow. His questions during their engagement hadn't seemed intrusive at the time. Just the inquiries of a future son-in-law taking an interest in his new family's affairs. Now, they felt like a strategic reconnaissance mission. What's the property tax situation like here, Evelyn? This neighborhood must have excellent appreciation rates. Have you thought about what you'll eventually do with all this space? I had answered him openly, proud of my financial security, proud to show Amelia's fiancé that she came from a stable home. Richard's photograph on my desk caught the light of the lamp, his eyes seeming to watch me as I worked. What would he have said about all this? He was always better at reading people than I was, at sensing hidden agendas. Trust, but verify, he always used to say. People will always show you their true colors, Evelyn, if you just pay attention. I had been too swept up in the happiness of Amelia's engagement to pay close enough attention, too grateful that she had found someone after her difficult divorce 3 years ago, too relieved to see her looking settled and content. The journal lay open on the desk, waiting for more entries. I picked up the pen again. Marcus Thorne, 38 years old, calls himself a business consultant, claims to help small companies optimize their efficiency, works from home, travels for clients on occasion, has never mentioned specific companies or demonstrated any detailed business acumen in conversation. The more I wrote, the more questions began to surface. What exactly did Marcus do for a living? I had never seen him go to a proper office, never overheard him on a business call in the house. His income seemed fine, but not extravagant. And yet, he had proposed to Amelia with a 2-carat diamond ring that must have set him back at least $20,000. I closed the journal and picked up my phone. Tomorrow, I would start making some inquiries, beginning with a call to Mr. Davis. My lawyer had handled Richard's estate. He knew my financial standing inside and out, and he understood the importance of discretion. Something felt deeply wrong about Marcus Thorne. Very wrong. The grocery bags felt unusually heavy as I pulled into my driveway on Thursday afternoon. 2 nights of fitful sleep since the confrontation at the restaurant had left me feeling weary and on edge. Every shadow seemed to be hiding a new threat to my tranquility. Mr. Henderson, my next-door neighbor, straightened up from his flower bed as I got out of the car, his weathered face etched with an expression of urgency. "Evelyn," he said, crossing from his yard to mine in a few quick strides, "I need to tell you something important." I set the groceries down on the hood of my car. Mr. Henderson's instincts as a retired police officer were evident in his serious tone. "What is it?" "Yesterday afternoon, Marcus brought a man to your house." He glanced toward my front door, then back at me. A professional type in a suit, carrying a briefcase and some kind of measuring tool. A chill ran down my spine. What exactly were they doing? They were walking around the property, measuring things, taking photographs. The man was jotting everything down in a notebook. Mr. Henderson's eyes narrowed. Looked to me like a professional appraisal. A very thorough one. The groceries on my car were suddenly the last thing on my mind. How long were they here? About an hour, maybe a bit longer. Marcus had keys. He let the man inside, too. My neighbor's expression made it clear he understood the gravity of the situation. "The fellow spent a lot of time in your backyard, measured the entire fence line, took photos of the foundation." My hands clenched into tight fists. "I figured you must have known about it. If I'd thought otherwise, I would have called you right away." "Thank you, Mr. Henderson. This is very important information." I grabbed the grocery bags with trembling hands. Very important. Indeed. Inside, I dropped the bags on the kitchen counter without a second thought and went directly to my study. The computer seemed to take an eternity to boot up, each second stretching out as my mind raced through the possibilities. The browser history. If Marcus had used my computer, he would have left a trail. The search history loaded, and my deepest fears were confirmed on the screen. On Wednesday afternoon, while I had been out at the hardware store, someone had been conducting extensive online research. Property appraisers, Portland suburbs, real estate valuation services, quick house sale companies, cash buyers for residential properties. Each search term felt like a punch to the gut. I scrolled further down the page and found more. Legal requirements for property transfer, Oregon. Power of attorney for real estate transactions. Elderly homeowner assistance programs. My hands were shaking as I clicked on the links to the websites he had visited. Professional appraisal services. Companies promising fast cash sales. Legal firms specializing in property transfers for senior citizens. Marcus hadn't just brought an appraiser to my house. He had been meticulously researching the entire process of taking it from me. The chair groaned as I leaned back, trying to absorb the sheer scale of his deceit. This hadn't been a spontaneous, ill-conceived request made over a glass of wine. This was a calculated, premeditated plan, likely months in the making. I thought back to the engagement period, to Marcus's careful questions about my finances, his keen interest in my daily schedule. Had he been assessing me, sizing me up as a target from the very beginning? My phone buzzed with an incoming text message from Amelia. "Mom, are you feeling any better? Marcus said you seemed really upset at dinner. Maybe we can all talk tonight?" Talk. Marcus wanted to talk again, probably to present his reasonable proposal. Now fortified with professional appraisals and legal research, I stared at the computer screen, the evidence of his scheme laid out in plain sight. With trembling fingers, I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Davis's number. This was far bigger than just wanting my house. This was systematic fraud, and I needed professional help immediately. Law offices of Davis, Associates. "This is Jessica speaking." My hand shook as I gripped the phone tighter. "Jessica, it's Evelyn Hayes. I need to speak with Mr. Davis right away. It's an emergency. He's with a client at the moment, Mrs. Hayes. Can I have him call you back? Tell him it's about fraud. Real estate fraud." The words felt strange and alien on my tongue. "Tell him my son-in-law, Marcus Thorne, is trying to steal my house." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'll get him for you right away, ma'am." The hold music seemed to stretch on for an eternity. I paced back and forth in my study, the browser history on the computer screen glowing like an indictment. "Evelyn." "Mr. Davis's voice was filled with immediate concern. "Jessica said something about fraud? Involving your son-in-law?" "Marcus Thorne." I forced the name out through clenched teeth. "He's planning to take my house, Mr. Davis. I have proof that he's been researching how to do it legally." The silence from his end of the line was unnervingly long. "Marcus Thorne, you said?" "Yes, he married my daughter 2 days ago, and now he's—" "Evelyn, I need you to sit down." His professional tone had sharpened, becoming something far more urgent. "Give me just a moment. I need to check something in my files." I heard the click of a keyboard and the rustle of papers, the familiar sounds of my lawyer's methodical work. But his tone told me this was anything but routine. "Evelyn, I currently have 3 active cases involving a Marcus Thorne." Each word was like a shard of ice. "He specializes in a particular type of real estate fraud that targets elderly homeowners." The room seemed to spin around me. "Are you telling me he's done this before?" "His pattern is remarkably consistent." Mr. Davis's voice was all business now, as if he were reading directly from a case file. "He marries into a family, gains their trust, and then uses forged documents to seize ownership of their property. The victims are almost always women in their 60s or 70s, usually recently widowed, and always with adult children who are facing some kind of financial strain." My free hand grabbed the edge of the desk for support. "But he just married my daughter." "That is his exact timeline, Evelyn. He moves very quickly, before his victims have a chance to react or seek legal counsel." I heard papers rustling again. "How much did you know about his background?" "Nothing concrete. He claimed to be a business consultant, said he worked from home." The admission felt humiliating. We were just so happy that Amelia had found someone after her divorce. Evelyn, you are in immediate danger. Mr. Davis's urgency sliced through my shock. Do not sign anything. Do not give him access to any of your financial documents. Do not let him handle any legal affairs for you, no matter what he says. What do I do about Amelia? She has no idea what kind of man she's married. First, we gather evidence. Then, we protect your assets. His tone left no room for debate. Your daughter's heart can mend, Evelyn, but your life savings cannot be recovered once they are stolen. I stared at the computer screen, at the glaring evidence of Marcus's research. He brought a property appraiser to my house yesterday. He used my computer to research the legal process. That is his standard operating procedure, Mr. Davis confirmed. He gets a professional appraisal, forges the transfer documents, and then uses a corrupt notary to validate the signatures. He spoke as if he were reading from a criminal's playbook. Tell me everything you've observed, from the beginning. I recounted it all. The demand at the restaurant, the appraiser's visit, the browser history, Marcus's probing questions during their engagement. A classic pattern, he confirmed. Evelyn, I am clearing my schedule. Can you be in my office first thing tomorrow morning? Bring every single document related to your property. The deed, your will, insurance policies, bank statements. Should I call the police? Not yet. We need irrefutable evidence first. His experience was evident in every word. Marcus is sophisticated. He has beaten fraud charges in the past by claiming the victims willingly transferred their property and later developed memory issues. Memory issues. The implication was insulting, but I understood the tactic. One more thing, Evelyn. His voice carried a serious warning. Be extremely careful around him until we meet. If he even suspects that you know his true nature, he may try to accelerate his plan. I hung up the phone and stared at my own reflection in the dark window pane. My son-in-law wasn't just greedy. He was a professional predator, and he had selected me as his next target. But I hadn't survived 40 years in the competitive field of engineering by backing down from a problem. Tomorrow, Mr. Davis and I would begin to build the case that would bring Marcus Thorne's criminal career to an end. As I reached for the combination to my safe, I heard Marcus's laughter coming from the kitchen, and for the first time since that night at the restaurant, I smiled. Let him laugh, while he still could. The drive home from Mr. Davis's office felt much longer than usual, his warnings echoing in my mind. Professional, criminal, systematic fraud, multiple victims. The words had transformed my son-in-law from a bothersome opportunist into something far more menacing. Marcus's car was still parked in my driveway when I arrived. Through the kitchen window, I could see him and Amelia sharing a meal, their conversation looking easy and animated. The scene of domestic normality felt like a grotesque charade, now that I knew the truth. I let myself in through the front door, calling out a casual greeting. Marcus's voice drifted back from the kitchen, sounding warm and friendly as he asked about my errands, the same voice that had demanded my house just 3 days earlier. In my study, I locked the door and went directly to the wall safe, which was concealed behind a portrait of my late husband, Richard. The combination 5/17/28. Our wedding anniversary had protected our most important documents for over 2 decades. Inside lay the tangible results of a lifetime of hard work. The property deed from 1985, my updated will from 2023, insurance policies, investment statements, all the documents Marcus needed to steal my legacy. I spread them out across my desk, examining each paper with the precision of an engineer. The house deed, officially stamped and notarized, was for a property worth over $500,000 in today's market. My will, which left everything to Amelia, had been updated after Richard passed away. Bank statements detailed the retirement savings that had taken decades of disciplined work to accumulate. Marcus didn't have access to any of this yet, but Mr. Davis's warning reverberated in my thoughts. He moves very quickly. From the kitchen, I could hear the clatter of dishes being cleared, the sounds of a normal married couple going about their evening, a routine that now served as a mask for Marcus's predatory intentions. How many other families had he infiltrated in this same way? How many other mothers had sat in their studies, realizing too late that they had welcomed a wolf into their homes? I pulled out my journal and began to document everything with methodical detail. Every suspicious conversation during their engagement, every question about my finances that had seemed caring at the time, but was now clearly reconnaissance. Evelyn, you must get tired rattling around in this big house all by yourself. Have you considered what you'll do with all this space eventually? Amelia worries about you living here all alone. Every one of those comments now revealed its true intent. An evaluation of my vulnerability, an assessment of my emotional attachment to the property, and a manipulation of my daughter's genuine concern for my well-being. The safe also held Richard's jewelry, including my engagement ring, a 2-carat diamond, strikingly similar to the one Marcus had given Amelia. Where had a struggling business consultant found $20,000 for a ring? I took methodical photographs of each document, creating digital copies and storing them in multiple secure locations. If Marcus somehow managed to get his hands on the originals, I would still have definitive proof of ownership. My engineering background had taught me the importance of redundancy and backup systems. My phone rang. It was Amelia. Mom, are you okay? You've been so quiet since the wedding dinner. Her voice was filled with genuine concern. The same concern that Marcus was undoubtedly exploiting for his own purposes. I'm fine, sweetheart, just a little tired. Marcus thinks maybe we should all sit down and talk things through. You know, clear the air. Clear the air, or present his forged documents and fake appraisals? All backed by his meticulous legal research and professional preparation? Maybe tomorrow, I said. Let me get some rest first. After hanging up, I continued with my security measures. I changed the PINs on all my bank accounts, called my insurance company to add fraud alerts to my policies, and scheduled a meeting with my investment advisor to discuss further protective actions. 3 other families destroyed, Mr. Davis had said. 3 other parents who had trusted their daughter's choice of a partner, who had prioritized family harmony over cautious suspicion. But I was not them. 40 years of solving complex problems had trained me to analyze threats systematically, to anticipate failure modes, and to build robust safeguards against worst-case scenarios. I locked the documents back in the safe and checked my watch. 9:30 p.m. Marcus and Amelia were likely settling in for the night, dreaming of their future in my house, built with my money. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. But tonight, I had one more call to make. The bank's fraud prevention hotline was answered on the second ring. First, National Security Department, this is Sarah. This is Evelyn Hayes, account number 447, 291. I need to report suspicious activity involving my son-in-law. As I carefully explained the situation to Sarah, I heard Marcus's laughter from upstairs, and my smile returned. Let him enjoy his last night of feeling secure. Tomorrow, his world would begin to unravel, just as he had planned for mine. 3 days of intense, systematic research lay before me as I sat down at my computer with my first cup of coffee. Mr. Davis had provided me with a list of the names of Marcus's previous victims, and I had a 48-hour window before our scheduled meeting with law enforcement. Marcus was still asleep upstairs with Amelia, which gave me precious, uninterrupted hours to work. The first victim on the list was from Phoenix, Arizona. Isabella Rossi, 73, whose daughter had married Marcus in October. By Christmas, forged documents claimed she had sold her house to a cash buyer for a price far below its market value. I found her on Facebook through her daughter's profile. Her recent posts depicted a cramped apartment, with complaints about escalating rent and photos of grandchildren she was no longer able to visit regularly. The stark contrast with her older posts, which showed a spacious ranch-style house, photos of her garden, and large family gatherings told the exact story Mr. Davis's files had described. Marcus's own social media presence painted a very different narrative. A professional headshot, photos from business conferences, glowing testimonials from supposedly satisfied clients. But when I cross-referenced the dates, I found glaring inconsistencies. Marcus claimed to be in Denver for a consultation on the same dates he was supposedly honeymooning in Phoenix with Isabella's daughter. Screenshot by screenshot, I meticulously documented every contradiction. His LinkedIn profile listed 3 different business addresses in the span of 18 months. His Facebook relationship history showed he had been married to 4 different women in 2 years, and each relationship followed the exact same timeline: a whirlwind courtship, a lavish wedding, and immediate concerns about housing. Day 2 was dedicated to the phone calls Mr. Davis had arranged. Isabella Rossi's voice trembled as she recounted her ordeal. "He was so charming and helpful at first," she said, her voice thick with the pain of betrayal. "He said he was worried about my safety, living all alone. He offered to handle my finances for me, so I wouldn't have to deal with the stress." Her words were heavy with sorrow. Then one morning, he just showed up with a moving truck and eviction papers. He said the house had been sold for my own good. Daniel Kim from Denver shared a similar story. 6 weeks after the wedding, he showed up with papers that said I had signed over my power of attorney. The signature looked just like mine, but I have no memory of ever signing such a document. Each conversation I had revealed more about Marcus's sophisticated operation: professional document forgers, corrupt notaries, and a level of legal expertise that made his victims question their own sanity. The emotional toll was also consistent. Adult children who had believed their new spouse over their elderly parent. Families torn apart by carefully orchestrated confusion. By the 3rd day, I had compiled a comprehensive timeline of his activities. Marcus's pattern was chillingly identical in every case. Target identification through dating apps or social circles, rapid courtship of financially vulnerable adult children, marriage within 6 months, followed by immediate housing pressure, professional appraisals, forged documents, and finally, the shocking revelation that the elderly parent had agreed to sell their home. The most damning piece of evidence, however, came from a deleted social media post that I managed to recover through Google's cache system. It had been posted just 2 days after my daughter's wedding. Marcus had written, "Another successful acquisition. This old woman won't know what hit her. Retiring early property investment." The post had been taken down within hours, but I had the screenshots. Marcus's own arrogance had provided the perfect proof of his premeditation. I organized all the information into distinct categories: digital proof, showing timeline inconsistencies, and multiple identities; testimonial evidence from previous victims; documentary evidence of forged signatures and impossible notarizations; and financial evidence tracking the fraudulent transactions. Mr. Davis called on Wednesday evening to check on my progress. "This is exceptional work, Evelyn," he said, after I walked him through my preliminary findings. "Most victims don't uncover the pattern until long after they've lost everything. What are our next steps?" "Tomorrow, we meet with Detective Olivia Chen. She's been tracking Marcus for 2 years, but hasn't had enough solid evidence to press charges." Mr. Davis's satisfaction was palpable. "Your research might finally be what we need to stop him for good." That night, I double-checked every document, every screenshot, every victim's statement. 3 days of relentless investigation had transformed me from a bewildered homeowner into a competent detective. The evidence was overwhelming, methodical, and I knew it would be enough to destroy Marcus's criminal career. As I was about to close my laptop, one final detail caught my eye. Marcus's most recent Facebook post, uploaded just an hour ago. Exciting changes on the horizon. Sometimes, family means making tough decisions for everyone's benefit. The timing of the post sent a shiver down my spine. Marcus was preparing to make his move, most likely tomorrow, when he believed I would be at my most vulnerable. I saved a screenshot of the post and allowed myself a grim smile. Let him try. I was ready. After 3 intense days hunched over my computer, gathering evidence against Marcus, I decided the house needed a proper cleaning. The irony was not lost on me. I was tidying up my home while simultaneously planning how to protect it from the man sleeping upstairs with my daughter. As I moved the coffee table to vacuum the rug underneath, a glint of morning light caught something unusual. A tiny lens, no bigger than a button on a shirt, was nestled behind the decorative ceramic bowl my husband Richard had bought for me in Italy. My engineer's brain processed the anomaly instantly. This wasn't a speck of dust or a misplaced screw. Someone had planted a camera in my living room. My hands trembled as I examined the device more closely. It was professional grade, motion activated, and had what looked like a micro SD card slot. The installation was sophisticated, nearly impossible to spot, unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. Marcus had been recording me. The sense of violation was even worse than his demand for my house. This was my sanctuary. The place where I had mourned Richard, where I had made private phone calls, where I had been planning my entire investigation against him. And all of it had been captured on digital video. I had to fight the urge to rip the device from its hiding place and smash it to pieces. Evidence. This could be crucial evidence if I handled it correctly. Using a small screwdriver from my toolbox, I carefully extracted the micro SD card. My computer seemed to take an eternity to recognize the tiny device, each second stretching out as I braced myself for what I might find. 47 video files appeared on the screen, spanning a period of 2 weeks. The earliest file was dated from Marcus's 3rd day in my house. With a sense of mounting dread, I clicked on the first file. My own face filled the screen. I was on the phone with my insurance company, discussing routine policy updates. The audio quality was crystal clear. The video surprisingly sharp for such a small device. File after file showed my daily routines. My morning coffee, watching the evening news, phone conversations with Mr. Davis about estate planning. Marcus had been cataloging my life, learning my patterns, undoubtedly searching for any information he could exploit. And then, I found what he had truly been recording. File 38 showed Marcus himself, standing in my living room while I was out at the grocery store. He was on his phone, speaking to someone with an air of casual confidence. The old woman is completely trusting. Marcus's voice echoed from my computer speakers, the clarity of it chilling. By the end of the month, the house will be ours. The documents are almost ready. I paused the recording, my heart hammering against my ribs. Here it was, in his own words. A clear admission of his criminal intent. The conversation continued. Gregory, are you sure the notary stamps will pass inspection? Gregory, a name I didn't recognize, but clearly Marcus's accomplice. These elderly targets can sometimes surprise you, a voice replied through Marcus's phone speaker. He's exactly like the others. Marcus's laugh was filled with cruel satisfaction. Proud, independent, but ultimately naive. He actually paid $15,000 for our wedding. Made it so easy to look legitimate. My vision blurred with rage. Every suspicion I had was now confirmed. Every fear validated. The recording went on. And the daughter? Amelia will never believe her precious mommy over her loving husband. She's the perfect cover. The perfect cover? My daughter wasn't his wife. she was his alibi. I immediately copied the file, creating backups on multiple devices. This single recording was worth more than my 3 days of detective work combined. It was Marcus's own voice, clearly stating his criminal intentions, naming his accomplice, and revealing his entire plan. From further recordings, I learned that Gregory Finch was the corrupt notary who had validated the forged documents for Marcus's previous victims. Phone conversations between them laid out their entire operation: target selection, document preparation, family manipulation, and property transfer. But Marcus had made one critical, arrogant mistake. He had discussed his crimes in detail, never imagining that his own surveillance equipment would become the very evidence that would condemn him. I stared at my reflection in the dark computer screen, processing the magnitude of my discovery. The hidden camera had been intended to give Marcus an advantage, to provide him with inside information about my daily routines and defenses. Instead, his overconfidence had handed me irrefutable proof of his criminal conspiracy. I closed the laptop and reached for my phone. This evidence changed everything. It was time to stop investigating and start prosecuting. Detective Olivia Chen had been Mr. Davis's recommendation for cases exactly like this one. As I dialed the police department's non-emergency number, I finally felt a shift in power. I was no longer on the defensive. I was on the attack. Marcus's own arrogance was about to be his downfall. The downtown police station felt more imposing than I had imagined as I walked through the front doors, my briefcase filled with 3 weeks' worth of evidence against my son-in-law. The discovery of the hidden camera recordings yesterday had been the final, damning piece of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. But when I had mentioned Marcus Thorne's name on the phone, Detective Olivia Chen had agreed to see me immediately. "Mrs. Hayes?" A woman in her 40s with a badge prominently displayed on her jacket approached me. "I'm Detective Chen. Thank you for coming in." Her handshake was firm and professional, but I could see a genuine curiosity in her eyes as she led me toward an interview room. "I have to admit, I wasn't expecting much when you called," she said, motioning for me to take a seat across from her at a stark metal table. Most elderly fraud victims have very little concrete evidence to offer. I placed my briefcase on the table with deliberate care. "Detective Chen, I spent 40 years as an engineer. I believe in thorough documentation." She opened my case file and began to review the meticulously organized folders. Her eyebrows rose steadily as she went through the social media screenshots, the victim testimonies, the financial records, and finally, the audio recordings from Marcus's own hidden camera. "After reviewing what you've brought me," she said after 20 minutes of careful examination, "I can say that this is the most comprehensive case file I have seen in my 15 years on the force." Detective Chen turned to her computer and began typing rapidly. "We've been tracking Marcus Thorne across 3 states for the past 8 months. He's wanted in connection with at least 12 fraud cases." 12? The number was staggering. "How is that possible?" "He's very good at what he does," she said, her tone laced with professional frustration. "The victims are often too embarrassed to come forward, and the evidence is usually not sufficient for a conviction." She pulled up Marcus's police file on her monitor, showing me a map with red pins marking locations across Oregon, Colorado, and Arizona. Each pin represented a family that had been destroyed. "Well, I am not embarrassed," I said firmly. "And I have more than enough evidence." Detective Chen leaned forward, her demeanor shifting from routine procedure to active strategy. "Mrs. Hayes, you could be the key to finally stopping this man, but it would require your active cooperation in a sting operation." My pulse quickened. "What kind of cooperation?" "We need you to act normally. Allow Marcus to proceed with his plan while we record everything." She studied my face intently. "It would mean letting him think he's succeeding, right up until the moment we have him on tape committing the crime. The thought of pretending to be a victim while Marcus plotted against me felt surreal. You want me to let him think he's winning? Until we have irrefutable evidence of his criminal intent in the act, she explained. Your recordings are excellent, but we need to capture him attempting the actual fraud. It's the only way to guarantee a conviction. What about my safety? We will have officers positioned all around your house. Response time will be under 30 seconds. She pulled out a small device, no bigger than a car key fob. This is a panic button. One press, and backup will be there immediately. I held the small device in my hand, feeling its solid weight. After 3 weeks of gathering evidence, the prospect of a direct confrontation with Marcus was both terrifying and necessary. When would this happen? Based on your recordings, Marcus mentioned the end of the month. That gives us 1 week to prepare. Detective Chen began to organize my evidence into official police folders. We'll need to install additional recording equipment, coordinate with the district attorney's office, and brief our tactical team. And Amelia? My daughter has no idea who she's married to. The detective's expression softened slightly. Family situations are always the most difficult part of these cases. But protecting your daughter means stopping Marcus before he can destroy any more families. I thought of Isabella Rossi, weeping over the loss of her home. Of Daniel Kim, hospitalized due to the stress. 12 families torn apart by one man's insatiable greed. Detective Chen, what do you need me to do? Everything you've given me today is a perfect start, she said, standing and extending her hand again. Tomorrow morning, my technical team will visit your house to install the surveillance equipment. By tomorrow evening, we will be ready for Marcus's next move. As she walked me to the station's exit, I felt the weight of our plan settling on my shoulders. I had 24 hours to mentally prepare for the most important performance of my life. Mrs. Hayes, Detective Chen said as we reached the door. In 15 years of police work, I have never seen a victim turn the tables so completely. Marcus Thorne has no idea what's coming for him. I drove home with the knowledge that my quiet retirement had just become the final chapter in a professional criminal's career. The house felt different as I walked through the front door, knowing that in less than 24 hours, it would be transformed into a crime scene. Detective Chen's technical team was scheduled to arrive at 8:00 a.m. to install their equipment, and by that evening, every word Marcus spoke would be recorded as evidence. I had one night to mentally prepare for the role of a lifetime. Amelia and Marcus were out for the evening, which gave me precious hours of solitude to process the plan. I sat in my study, surrounded by the evidence that had led me to this moment, and tried to visualize the conversation that would take place tomorrow. Marcus would present his forged documents with a practiced, confident air. I would need to react naturally shocked, confused, and then, gradually, defeated. The performance had to be convincing enough for him to expose his criminal methods on camera. Morning arrived far too quickly. At 8:00 a.m. sharp, 3 unmarked vans pulled into my driveway. Detective Chen emerged from the first one, followed by a team of technical specialists carrying cases of equipment. Mrs. Hayes, we'll have everything installed within 4 hours, she announced, directing her team toward my house. After that, we rehearse. I watched, fascinated, as the specialists went to work with surgical precision. Micro cameras appeared throughout my living room and kitchen, each device smaller than a quarter and completely invisible once in position. Audio equipment was next, directional microphones that could capture a whispered conversation from across the room. These cameras record in ultra-high definition, the lead technician explained, as he adjusted a lens hidden behind a picture frame. The audio system automatically filters out background noise. Unless Marcus is specifically searching for surveillance equipment, he will never notice a thing. Detective Chen handed me an earpiece that was no bigger than a hearing aid. This is a direct line to our monitoring station. We'll be able to guide you if necessary. Where will you be positioned? We'll have a mobile command unit parked across the street. Officers in the neighboring houses. A backup team staged 2 blocks away. She showed me a tablet that displayed multiple camera angles of my own living room. Response time will be under 30 seconds if you use the panic signal. By noon, the installation was complete. My familiar, comfortable home had become a sophisticated recording studio, every surface concealing equipment worth thousands of dollars. Now, we rehearse, Detective Chen announced. For the next 2 hours, we practiced various likely scenarios. A detective played the part of Marcus, while I rehearsed my natural responses to his manipulative tactics. Remember? Your safety is our top priority, Detective Chen emphasized. Don't try to trap him. Let him reveal his own criminality organically. Just be yourself. Be suspicious. Ask the kinds of questions any reasonable person would ask. So, Evelyn, we need to discuss the house transfer paperwork, the detective said, role-playing Marcus's probable approach. I'm not interested in transferring anything, I replied. Perfect. Keep your responses natural and firm. The more he has to explain, the more evidence we'll gather. At 3:00, Detective Chen tested all the communication systems one last time. The earpiece crackled to life. Testing, Mrs. Hayes. Can you hear me clearly? Crystal clear. Excellent. Officers are moving into position now. I watched through my kitchen window as neighbors I had known for years welcomed visiting relatives into their homes. Mr. Henderson gave me a subtle nod from his front yard, knowing that his house now contained 2 armed police officers. Technical check complete, Detective Chen reported. All cameras are recording. Audio levels are optimal. Communication systems are active. The house looked exactly the same as it always had, but I knew that sophisticated equipment worth more than my car was now documenting every movement, every conversation, every breath. At 5:00, Marcus's car pulled into the driveway. Showtime, Mrs. Hayes. Detective Chen's voice whispered through my earpiece. Remember, we are right here with you. I touched the panic button in my pocket and watched through the front window as Marcus approached my door. He was carrying a manila envelope that I had no doubt contained forged documents bearing my signature. He knocked with a cheerful confidence, completely oblivious to the fact that his next conversation would be his last as a free man. The doorbell rang at precisely 2:00 p.m., and I felt the slight vibration from the communication device in my pocket. Detective Chen's signal that all recording equipment was active. Through the window, I watched Marcus walk up my front steps, accompanied by another man, carrying a leather briefcase. Both of them wore the same confident smile that I now recognized as predatory. This was it, the moment that 3 weeks of tireless investigation had been leading to. I opened the door with a practiced calmness. Marcus. And you've brought a friend. Evelyn. Marcus's enthusiasm seemed so genuine it was chilling. This is Gregory Finch, a licensed notary public. We have wonderful news about your housing situation. Gregory Finch looked exactly as I had imagined a corrupt official would. Middle-aged, overly formal, and carrying himself with an air of false authority. His handshake felt cold and clammy, like touching a snake. Mrs. Hayes, it's such a pleasure, Gregory said, his voice dripping with manufactured sincerity. Marcus has told me so much about your unique circumstances. They settled into my living room with a theatrical confidence, Marcus spreading documents across my coffee table as if he already owned the place. The hidden cameras were recording every gesture, every smirk, every calculated movement. Evelyn, I have incredible news, Marcus announced, his voice carrying the same triumphant tone he had used when he proposed to Amelia. We've just completed the sale of this house. You're moving to a lovely senior facility. It's all been arranged. I picked up the papers and examined them with an engineer's precision, noting the professional quality of the forgeries. That's interesting, Marcus. Who exactly did you sell my house to? A wonderful young family. They paid well above market value. His smile never wavered. Gregory here has all the legal documentation. Gregory opened his briefcase with a flourish, revealing official-looking stamps, seals, and notarization equipment. Mrs. Hayes, these documents show the completed sale of your property, he said. Everything is legally binding and has been properly notarized. I don't recall agreeing to sell my house, Mr. Finch. Sometimes, elderly individuals can forget these important arrangements. Gregory replied with practiced condescension. The paperwork clearly shows your signature and consent. Perfect. They were establishing their entire fraudulent scheme on camera, using the exact language Detective Chen had predicted. Well, this is certainly unexpected, I said, maintaining my role as the confused elderly victim. Perhaps we should drive down to the police station first, just to make sure everything is in order. Marcus's confident expression flickered for a brief moment. The police station? Why would we need to do that? They're very interested in the information I sent them about your previous house sales. The temperature in the room seemed to drop by 10 degrees. Marcus's face went pale, and Gregory shifted nervously in his chair. What? What do you mean, previous sales? Marcus's voice had lost its confident edge. I mean your activities in Phoenix, Denver, and 3 other cities, Marcus. The police have been looking for you for quite some time. Marcus stood up abruptly, and the forged documents scattered across the floor. You're talking nonsense. Gregory, tell her these documents are completely legal. Marcus, what is he talking about? Gregory's professional mask was beginning to crack. You said this was a clean operation. I mean that Detective Olivia Chen has 47 recordings of you discussing your criminal plans, Marcus. I remained seated, watching as their panic escalated, including your conversations with Gregory about forged notary seals. Gregory's face went white. Marcus, you said this house was clean. You never mentioned any police investigations. Shut up, Gregory. Marcus grabbed the documents from the floor and headed for the door. This old woman is confused. She doesn't know what she's talking about. But the sound of car doors slamming shut outside made him freeze in his tracks. Through the window, unmarked police vehicles had surrounded my house, with officers positioning themselves at every exit. Marcus turned back to me, his predatory confidence now replaced by a desperate fear. What have you done? I pressed the panic button in my pocket and said calmly. I protected my home from thieves, Marcus. Something you should have considered before you decided to target the wrong engineer. The front door burst open, and Detective Chen stepped through with 3 uniformed officers, their badges gleaming under the lights of my living room. Philip Green, she announced with professional satisfaction. You're under arrest. I'm afraid there's nowhere to run, Marcus. The front door had burst open before he could reach it, and Detective Chen stepped inside with 3 uniformed officers, their badges shining in my living room. Marcus stood frozen in the center of the room, still clutching the forged documents that would now serve as crucial evidence of his crimes. Marcus Thorne, you are under arrest for fraud, forgery, elder abuse, conspiracy, and operating an interstate criminal enterprise, Detective Chen announced, her voice carrying the authority of 15 years in law enforcement. This is ridiculous. Marcus's confidence had completely shattered. Evelyn, tell them this is all just a family misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding here, Marcus, was you thinking you could steal my house. I replied, remaining seated, as I watched justice unfold with the precision of a well-executed engineering project. Gregory Finch had already raised his hands in surrender, his briefcase lying open to reveal the tools of their criminal trade. Officers, I want to cooperate fully, he said, his voice trembling. I didn't know about his previous crimes. Mr. Finch, you are also under arrest, Detective Chen replied coolly. Your cooperation will be noted in your file. Gregory, don't say anything, Marcus shouted, as the officers moved in to secure him. They can't prove anything, but they could, and they would, prove everything. The surveillance cameras had captured every word, every gesture, every incriminating admission. As Marcus raised his hands to be handcuffed, I felt the deep satisfaction of a complex project reaching its successful conclusion. "Sir, we need you to hand over those documents," one of the officers commanded. Marcus's final act of defiance was to try and tear up the forged papers. 2 officers immediately restrained him, preserving the evidence that would send him to federal prison. "These papers are private family business," he protested. "They are evidence in multiple felony cases across 3 states. Detective Chen corrected him, carefully collecting each document for the evidence chain. Through my front window, I could see my neighbors gathering on the sidewalk. Mr. Henderson stood in his yard with his arms crossed, giving a nod of approval. The quiet suburban street had become a crime scene, and the entire community was witnessing Marcus's downfall. "Mrs. Hayes, for the record," Detective Chen said, "did these men attempt to fraudulently claim ownership of your house using forged documents?" "Yes, Detective. They used fake signatures, corrupt notary seals, and systematic intimidation tactics." "She's lying." Marcus's desperation was now complete. This was a legitimate family arrangement. I was helping an elderly woman who can no longer manage her own affairs. The irony of his statement was perfect. His final defense was the very same condescending attitude that had motivated me to fight back so methodically. "The judge will determine the legitimacy of your claims," Detective Chen replied, leading Marcus toward the door in handcuffs. Gregory's cooperation began immediately. "Officers, I have information about other operations, other targets Marcus was researching. I want to help prevent more crimes." "A smart choice, Mr. Finch," Detective Chen said. "Full cooperation might reduce your sentence from 15 years to 5. As the police cars were loaded with their prisoners, media vans began to arrive. Word had spread quickly through the neighborhood that a major fraud operation had been exposed by an elderly resident's own detective work. "Mrs. Hayes," a reporter called out from behind the police tape. "How did you uncover this criminal scheme?" 40 years of engineering taught me to analyze problems systematically," I replied. "When something doesn't make sense, you investigate until it does." Detective Chen returned, as the crowd began to disperse. "Outstanding work, Mrs. Hayes. This arrest will close cases in 5 states. You have probably saved dozens of families from similar fraud. What happens next? The trial will be in about 8 weeks. With your evidence and today's recordings, a conviction is virtually certain." She handed me her card. "The district attorney will want to discuss your testimony. But this case is as solid as they come." I looked at my house. Finally secure again. No longer under threat from criminal predators. The surveillance equipment would be removed tomorrow, and my home would return to normal. But I would never be the same person who had been so blindsided by Marcus's demand 3 weeks ago. "Detective Chen," I said, "thank you for believing that an old woman's suspicions were worth investigating." "Mrs. Hayes," she replied with genuine respect, "you didn't just help yourself. You stopped a career criminal who was destroying families all across the country. That's something to be proud of." As the last police car disappeared down my quiet street, I realized that while this battle was won, the war for justice was just beginning. Marcus's trial would be the final chapter in a story that began with his arrogant demand for my house. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, I would sleep peacefully in my own bed, in my own house, protected by my own intelligence and determination. 8 weeks had passed since Marcus's arrest, and I walked up the granite steps of the Cook County Courthouse, carrying the same briefcase that had helped to convict him. The spring morning was crisp, with the May sunshine warming my face as I prepared for the final confrontation. Detective Chen was waiting by the courthouse entrance, and she smiled as she saw me approaching. "Ready for the final chapter, Mrs. Hayes?" she asked. "More than ready," I replied, feeling the weight of justice in my briefcase. Inside, the courtroom was buzzing with activity. Marcus sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his confident swagger now replaced by the hollow stare of a man facing decades in prison. Gregory Finch had already pleaded guilty in exchange for his testimony against his former partner. But the most important sight for me was Amelia, sitting in the front row behind the prosecution's table. She had filed for divorce within a week of Marcus's arrest, reclaiming her maiden name and her dignity. When our eyes met, she gave me a smile filled with the same warmth I remembered from her childhood. Judge Eleanor Vance called the court to order. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are here today to determine the guilt or innocence of Marcus Thorne on charges of interstate fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and criminal conspiracy. The prosecutor's opening statement laid out Marcus's criminal empire in systematic detail. 12 victims across 5 states, over $2 million in stolen property, a pattern of targeting elderly homeowners through marriage fraud that spanned 3 years. The evidence will show, the prosecutor concluded, that Marcus Thorne is not an opportunistic criminal, but a systematic predator who destroyed families for his own personal profit. Marcus's defense attorney attempted some damage control. Ladies and gentlemen, my client made some poor choices, but he is not the criminal mastermind. The prosecution claims he was manipulated by others into these unfortunate situations. I almost laughed out loud. Even facing life in prison, Marcus couldn't accept responsibility for his own actions. The prosecution's case unfolded with mathematical precision. Victim after victim took the stand to testify about Marcus's identical methods. The quick courtship, the immediate housing concerns, the forged documents, the corrupt notarization, and the utter destruction of their families. Isabella Rossi from Phoenix spoke through tears about losing the home she had lived in for 40 years. Daniel Kim from Denver described the stress-induced heart attack he suffered following his eviction. Each story was identical. Each family devastated by the same systematic predator. Then came the audio recordings from Marcus's own surveillance camera. The courtroom fell silent as his voice filled the room. The old woman is completely trusting. By the end of the month, the house will be ours. Marcus's face crumpled as he heard his own words condemning him. There was no defense against his own recorded confession. The prosecution calls Evelyn Hayes to the stand, the prosecutor announced. I walked to the witness box with steady steps, feeling the weight of not just my own case, but of all the other families Marcus had destroyed. Mrs. Hayes, please describe the events of March 25. The defendant arrived at my house with forged documents, claiming that I had sold my property. I said clearly. He demanded my immediate eviction and threatened to have me placed in a nursing home if I didn't comply. And how did you respond? I suggested we visit the police station, where I had already reported his criminal activities based on 3 weeks of my own investigation. Marcus's attorney attempted a cross-examination. Mrs. Hayes, isn't it possible that this was all just a simple family misunderstanding? Counselor, I replied with engineering precision. Systematic criminals who target elderly victims across multiple states don't create misunderstandings. They create federal cases. The courtroom erupted in quiet laughter. Even the judge cracked a smile. After 2 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Judge Vance's sentencing was swift and merciless. Thorne, you have systematically targeted vulnerable elderly citizens for financial exploitation. This court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison, with full restitution to be paid to all of your victims. Marcus's legs seemed to give out as the bailiff approached with the handcuffs. The confident predator who had demanded my house just 2 months ago was now a broken man, facing more than a decade behind bars. Gregory Finch received 5 years, with the possibility of parole. His cooperation was noted, but not excused. Outside the courthouse, Amelia hugged me tightly. Mom, I am so proud of how you protected not just yourself, but all those other families. Sweetheart, You loved someone who deceived professionals for years. That shows your good heart, not poor judgment. How can you ever forgive me for bringing him into our lives? Because you are my daughter, and you deserve someone who values the wonderful person you are. Detective Chen joined us on the courthouse steps. Mrs. Hayes, this case will be taught in police academies for years to come. You've shown that age brings wisdom, not vulnerability. As Amelia and I drove home together, she reached over and squeezed my hand. Mom, what's next for you? I thought about the possibility of speaking engagements for elder fraud prevention, about helping other victims find their voice, about using my engineering mind to solve problems beyond just my own. Whatever comes next, I said, I know I can handle it. At 68, I had learned that protecting one's family requires not just love, but also strategic thinking, careful preparation, and an unwavering determination. And sometimes, that combination is exactly what justice needs most. My house was safe. My daughter was healing. And Marcus Thorne would spend the next dozen years of his life remembering the old woman who refused to be his victim.